Dragon Ball Daima has recently started releasing episodes, and one of the things I'm most enjoying from the show so far is how amazing its animation has been. It's really great from a visual standpoint, with its first episode even reanimating some of Dragon Ball Z's most iconic scenes in a very detailed way. And honestly, in these past 10 years we've seen some amazing works of animation come out of the Dragon Ball franchise, from its great recent movies like Broly and Superhero, the higher quality episodes of Super, to even its recent video games like the incredible Dragon Ball FighterZ and Sparking Zero. It just brings me an insane amount of joy to see the franchise get revitalized in such a successful way. But oddly enough, none of this would have happened if we hadn't seen a little movie from 2009 called Dragon Ball Evolution, which is probably one of the worst movie adaptations of any pre-existing property ever made. And it was so bad that it made the series creator, the great late Akira Toriyama, come out of retirement because he was so offended and angry after seeing how his work of art was bastardized into something completely unrecognizable. And as a result, he got the motivation to write a new Dragon Ball movie, which ended up being 2013's Battle of Gods, that led to the Super anime, which reintroduced Dragon Ball to a whole new generation. This is a pretty similar situation to what happened with the Batman film franchise, since if it wouldn't have been for the financial and critical disaster that Batman and Robin was, we never would have gotten to see Batman Begins and the Nolan trilogy, since the entire motivation to create a dark, serious reboot of Batman came as a course correction and a response to Batman and Robin's reception. So sometimes, in order to have great success, we need to fail spectacularly first. When you actually sit down and watch Dragon Ball Evolution, the biggest question you'll probably have in your mind the entire time is, what happened? How the hell did this movie actually end up being made? Well, this might surprise you, but Dragon Ball is actually worth a lot of money. It's insanely profitable as an intellectual property, and it's been a huge success ever since it was first published and shown in Jump back in 1984. Anime itself became a worldwide phenomenon in large part because Dragon Ball became a worldwide phenomenon. This is why 20th Century Fox acquired the rights to produce a live-action Dragon Ball film back in 2002, and in those initial reports there were already estimates that the studio was willing to invest over $100 million into producing the movie. They knew that Dragon Ball was an insanely popular franchise that could be capable of turning in millions in profit. They just didn't know how to make an actual good movie out of the property. And, unfortunately, the final result ended up being something closer to a cruel practical joke rather than a professional Hollywood production. Although Fox acquired Dragon Ball's live-action rights in 2002, the movie still got stuck in development hell, since the studio couldn't manage to secure a creative team that would be right for the project. Throughout the movie's development, they constantly disregarded and ignored the suggestions from Akira Toriyama, and didn't allow him to have a voice in the adaptation of his own original creation. The studio instead went through many different scripts that didn't fully understand the appeal of Dragon Ball, and they considered a number of potential directors, with some of the rumored candidates they considered being Robert Rodriguez, George Lucas, and Zack Snyder, who is honestly the only director that in my opinion has come the closest to being able to translate the insane large-scale kinetic action from shonen anime into live action. The fights between Superman and the Kryptonians and Man of Steel have always personally reminded me of Dragon Ball Z. Another potential director they considered was Stephen Chow, a filmmaker from Hong Kong responsible for some really entertaining over-the-top comedic action movies like Kung Fu Hustle and Shaolin Soccer. He could have been a pretty solid choice for an anime adaptation, but he ultimately passed on directing the project and he only served as a producer on the final film. Fox spent years developing different ideas for what a Dragon Ball movie could possibly be. And in 2004, they hired screenwriter Ben Ramsey to create a new script based on an early treatment for the movie. And a fun fact about this is that we can actually read the full original script for what ended up becoming Dragon Ball Evolution, since the script was leaked onto the internet. The script is simply titled Dragon Ball Z, and it has a number of differences compared to the final film. Goku would have still been depicted as an 18-year-old high schooler like in Evolution, but he would have had two best friends named Cal and Wulan, who were created just for the story, and they would have died alongside Grandpa Gohan. The main villains would have been Pilaf, Shu, and Mai, similar to the first arc of Dragon Ball. But in this story, Shu would have been portrayed as a humanoid monster instead of a dog, Mai would have been portrayed as a shapeshifter, and Pilaf would have been an albino dwarf with blue veins. But the big twist of the movie would have been that Pilaf was actually Piccolo in disguise, using the Dragon Balls to wish himself back into his original Piccolo form, and he would have been defeated by Goku after turning into a great ape. Another change from the source material would be that Oolong would have been depicted as an evil spirit rather than an anthropomorphic pig, but this script does try to include more recognizable elements from Dragon Ball. Krillin would have appeared for a brief scene in Kami House as a small cameo. Puar would have also had a cameo but as a regular normal cat. Master Roshi would have had a more faithful look, with him being an old bald man with sunglasses, flip-flops, and a Hawaiian shirt. The Ox King would have also appeared, as well as other minor characters from the original manga, but most of these aspects would eventually be written out of the film after many rewrites. Still though, I'm gonna leave a link in the description just in case you want to check out for yourself the original script for the Dragon Ball movie, since it is legitimately a pretty interesting piece of trivia from the franchise's history. Years later, on 2007, Fox decided to force the movie into starting production, in large part due to the unstable situation in Hollywood at the time, as the Writers Guild of America began a strike to better their working conditions and renegotiate their compensation for residuals. This likely caused Fox to try to rush the production before the strike could pause the movie indefinitely. So they hired director Justin Wong to make the movie based on a final script by Ben Ramsey, although it was a version that was heavily modified from Ramsey's original 2004 draft. And in the years after the movie's released, he's actually gone on interviews to apologize for his work on the film, which I honestly respect. But we always need to remember that whenever a piece of media turns out to be bad or poor quality, it's never just the fault of one single person. Of course, Ben Ramsey isn't the person responsible for Evolution turning out the way that it did, and his original 2004 script does prove that he at least tried to incorporate more elements from the original source material into the film. But most of those elements were discarded upon later revisions by the studio. Instead of the proposed $100 to $120 million budget Fox was considering, and that had been confirmed to some of the movie's actors when they signed onto the project, the budget actually ended up being closer to $30 million, and to save costs, it was mostly filmed in Mexico, and a lot of the movie was shot in an abandoned jeans factory that was repurposed into a set, which just goes to show how rushed Dragon Ball Evolution truly was, and it all contributed into the movie turning out so goddamn bad. But a kind of depressing thought is that the movie could have been even worse if some of its original designs had gone through. For example, the final look for Goku's Ozaru or Great Ape transformation that we saw in the movie left a lot to be desired. He wasn't even a great ape, he was kinda small, and looked more sorta like a werewolf than an ape. But just take a look at this design they almost went with. That's goddamn awful. It looks so bad that it makes me uncomfortable. It looks more like a troll or an ogre than a great ape. These are stills from an early rough cut of the film, and this design was ultimately replaced by the final one we saw. But besides that monstrosity, conceptual artist Alex Tuiz, who worked on Dragon Ball Evolution's production, later shared on his website some designs that he made that went unused, and his Ozaru designs honestly don't look all that bad. They look more savage and intimidating than the final design. He also shared a number of rejected designs for Piccolo. His vision for the character kind of leans more into making him look like a demon, and some of his designs were more faithful to his look from the original manga, with a green hue that's closer to his original green color. He also incorporated the character's antennas in a lot of designs, and one concept art had Piccolo wearing his white cape and turban, which is really awesome. Piccolo has always been my favorite Dragon Ball character ever since I was a kid, and while it most likely wouldn't have made the movie much better, I still would have liked to see them try to adapt a more faithful Piccolo look similar to this one. Although he's supposed to be Demon King Piccolo in Evolution rather than Piccolo Jr., so maybe they could have tried to adapt his gi from Dragon Ball, or at least not have him look like a cheap knockoff of the mask. Besides those designs from Alex Tuiz, we also have some concept art shared by artist Gerard S. Marantz, who also worked on Evolution's production, and some years ago he posted on Instagram some unused Piccolo sketches he had made, and while it is a different take from how the character looks in the source material, I do think it's a better design than the final one from the finished movie. It even incorporates some pink in Piccolo's arm like his original look. Marantz also shared some designs for the monster Fulum assassins that worked for Piccolo in the movie, and these unused designs do look kinda cool. They are more visually unique than their final look. Evolution also had a video game tie-in for the PSP which I never played, and it was apparently pretty similar to the Shin Budokai games which I did play as a kid. But as a bonus feature in the game, there were a number of concept art, designs, and storyboards from the production of both the game and the movie. In the end, Dragon Ball Evolution was immediately panned by both critics and fans as soon as it released, and despite having a relatively low budget, it still managed to bomb at the box office.
Always have faith in who you are. Remember.
Did you know that before the movie had released, Fox was actually considering making more Evolution sequels? In a 2009 interview that MTV had with Justin Chadwick and James Masters, who played Goku and Piccolo respectively, they revealed that Fox already had a finished script for a Dragon Ball Evolution 2, and it apparently would have delved deeper into the lore of Dragon Ball Z. Masters mentioned that he had actually signed for 3 movies, and that his character would have started to really get interesting in the sequel, saying that since they were gonna get into the Z Saga, we would have seen Piccolo become young again, and become the Piccolo that most people recognize. So apparently, if Evolution would have gotten a sequel, it would have continued from that post-credits scene they included in the movie, where they showed that Piccolo had survived, and in the sequel we would have seen him rejuvenated into looking more like Piccolo Jr. from the end of Dragon Ball and the start of Z. So the same Piccolo would have gotten younger, rather than him being a reincarnation or son of the original King Piccolo. We can also assume that most likely we would have seen an attempt at adapting the Saiyan saga, with Piccolo and Goku joining forces to stop the Saiyans. And it's also been rumored that an Evolution sequel would have introduced new characters like Krillin and Tenshinhan. However, none of this ended up happening because the movie sucked ass. I mean, could you imagine if by some cruel twist of fate, Evolution would have actually gotten a sequel and we would have seen Dragon Ball Z also get humiliated like this? That would have been embarrassing. As mentioned previously, the movie sucked so much that it made Akira Toriyama want to return to actively work on the franchise, which led to Battle of Gods, Dragon Ball Super, and many other projects that have completely revitalized Dragon Ball. And although it's a huge shame that Toriyama passed away this year in 2024, it honestly makes me happy to know that he still got the time to return to the manga he had created decades ago, which impacted the lives of millions of people and literally changed the media landscape and the world really. As a Latin American, I honestly can't fathom how the world would be without Dragon Ball. Seeing Dragon Ball animated in such a high quality, beautiful way, like in the Broly movie or in the recent Daima series, makes me really grateful for Toriyama and all of the amazing artists that worked on the series throughout the decades. And in a weird sort of way, I'm also grateful for Dragon Ball Evolution, because it was a necessary step for Dragon Ball to get where it is today. So yeah, I'm grateful. And I'm also really grateful that you watched till the end of this video. Thank you so much. And let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you watching Dragon Ball Daima? Do you like it so far, or would you have preferred to see the return of Super? Would you have liked to see a sequel to Evolution? Oh, okay, I'm just fucking with you.